And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Although he never visited Canada, it was named after Prince Rupert of the Rhine. Incorporated March 10, 1910, Prince Rupert was named after the first governor of the Hudson Bay Company as a result of a nationwide competition held by the Grand Trunk Railway, the prize for which was $250. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1991.
Prince Rupert, the city on the rugged north coast, derived its name from a nationally held contest held at the turn of the century. The prize money was divided between two people who thought Prince Rupert, who was a main cog in the Hudson Bay's trading company wheel, would be an appropriate name for a newborn town with natural resources abound. It was the dawn of a brand new century, ripe with the promise of economic prosperity. Charles Hayes, who was president of the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway, decided to designate Prince Rupert as the terminus of his rail line across the Northwest. As Elaine Moore, the curator of the Museum of Northern BC, explains, it was the prospect of employment on the railway that first motivated people northbound.
First, people came here to work on the railway. It was a tent city. There were no buildings. The railway would not sell the land, so people had to build temporary buildings and live in tents. And in 1910, the city itself was actually incorporated, and they had the sale of lots in that year as well. So that's when it really started to settle. But it was the railroad that brought original economy. Also, there were several areas around here that were busy towns until Prince Rupert itself was built. For instance, Port Essington, that was on the opposite bank of the Skeena from where the railroad was built. So once the railroad was complete and there was no longer the need for Port Essington to be the jumping off point for the riverboats, then the economy there died, and many of the canneries moved to this area, for instance, because it was more active. The railroad went through here, shipping as well.
So that's what they used to attract people to the north, was what, the fishing aspect, the mining, the logging?
Early on was fishing and mining and logging, and of course tourism as well. The GTP had envisioned tourism as being a large part of it. In fact, they had the famous architect Rattenberry design a 1,000-room hotel. He's the same architect that designed the Empress in Victoria, but the one he designed for Prince Rupert was much grander. And in fact, they started building that hotel in 1911. They started digging the foundations for it. And in the meantime, Charles Hayes went to Britain to secure funding for the railroad. And that was in 1912. He went down on the Titanic. And shortly after that, of course, the war started, so they were unable to complete the hotel because not only the capital was lacking, but also laborers to help build that. So
where is that location today?
It's where the Rupert Square Mall sits today. In fact.
Is that right?
Yeah. So it never was built. All they got to was digging the foundation. And of course, shortly after the First World War, then the GTP went bankrupt, and the CN took over and delegated Prince Rupert as branch line as opposed to terminus.
Long before Charles Hayes had even thought about settling on the north coast, the natives had been living in the area for thousands of years. It would seem the arrival of the non-natives did not cause any rifts between the two groups.
Prince Rupert itself, the island, Cain Island, and the area of the waterfront had several Indian villages, of course, but they'd all been deserted for quite a long time, because in the 1830s, when Fort Simpson was built, most of the native people moved there because of the trade. So there was no natives living here at the time, but there was a negotiated settlement with the with the provincial government and some people from Fort Simpson for the land. However, that's part of the land claims today because not all of the bands, of course, were included in that signing away of their land. So, but the people seemed to get along. They were quite integrated, you know, because Native people, they fished, and you know, right along other people, they did the work with them, so they were quite integrated into the society.
So it doesn't really look like there's much difference today compared to yesterday as far as the industry or the spirit of the people, for that matter.
I don't think there is. You know, it's quite interesting. We've recently developed an exhibit. It's a traveling exhibit based on the life of a man that came here specifically to work on the railroad in 1908. And he writes in his letters that he thinks that, you know, that they were working hard and they were going through the hardships that they went through so that people in the future could live in a place that was grand. In his terms, that's what he envisioned, and that they would have an easy time of it and wouldn't even need to think about the hardships that the people came here to settle the place had. You know, so it's really kind of an interesting perspective from someone living in modern Prince Rupert to look at the way the people then viewed it. But otherwise, I don't think the lifestyles are really all that different. You know, that people created their own recreation.
The city of Prince Rupert, yesterday and today, from infancy to adulthood, the city and its people have gone through teething pains, growing pains, and continue today to fight the hardships that come with living on the North Coast. In the beginning, the city's fathers fought rugged terrain, harsh weather conditions, and the Depression, not to mention 2 world wars. Today, residents deal with ever-rising taxes, the Gulf War, and still harsh weather conditions. Although Prince Rupert has come a long way since its beginnings, it would seem the pioneer spirit that was born back in 1905 has been passed down from generation to generation. Although it is now 1991, there remains a glint in the eyes and a knowing smile on the lips of the city's residents when asked, how can you possibly live in such a remote, isolated place way up there on the North Coast? Which just goes to show the old adage, the more things change, the more they stay the same, rings true.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Petrochemical plants convert natural resources such as crude oil, natural gas, ores, and minerals into products for a wide range of applications. They produce many important building blocks for industry processes, including ethylene, propylene, and aromatics. Let us return to our archives to bring you this story from 1991.
Ocelot Chemicals has formed an association with a company called Alberta Envirofuels, which is building a new plant in Edmonton to produce the MTBE, made from butane and methanol.
Alberta Envirofuels is the joint venture operating company of the MTBE plant in Edmonton. It's an equal partnership between Neste, who is the Finnish national oil company, and Petro-Canada. Neste has been involved in the MTBE business for approximately 10 years now and is bringing that expertise, while Petro-Canada brings the domestic expertise and the business knowledge.
When the news was announced, most Kitimat residents asked, "What's MTBE?" And information supplied by the company indicates it's a product similar to gasoline with a relatively low toxic potential. Though commercially available for 10 years, its use isn't widespread, but that will change with more and more controls on hydrocarbon emissions on vehicles being introduced. The gasoline additive provides several advantages.
There are actually 3 main benefits of blending the MTBE into the gasoline. The first is that MTBE has a very high octane rating, which allows the removal of lead and the reduction of aromatic compounds, which have historically been used to boost octanes in gasolines. Second, MTBE in its chemical structure contains an oxygen atom, which enhances the combustion and reduces carbon monoxide and hydrocarbon emissions from automobiles. And third, the cold starting properties of MTBE allow for a reduction of the high vapor pressure compounds in gasoline, which again result in lower hydrocarbon emissions from automobiles, but also from storage tanks.
So you've got better performance and lower emissions, in other words?
Yeah.
4.5 million barrels of MTBE will be shipped in rail cars to Kitimat. What happens in the event of a derailment? In the petrochemical industry, safeguarding against accidents seems to be the key to protecting the environment.
Preventing the spill is the key point here, I think. Alberta EnviroFuels will be leasing a fleet of new rail cars specifically built for MTBE and will be dedicated for MTBE use. These cars will have the latest specs and we built with the latest technology. We've also had quite a few discussions with CN about, in the event of an accident, about CN's response and how Alberta EnviroFuels would fit into the picture.
At the marine terminal, spill prevention is the focus of emergency shut-off systems, both on shore and on the ships.
Our design includes emergency shut-off valves at the dock to prevent any spills from the pipeline, and also the loading arms, they shut off and disconnect in case the ship moves. But if there was a spill on the water, so MTBE behaves differently than most of the petroleum products. It doesn't adhere to surfaces, and on the surface of the water it forms a thin film which evaporates quite quickly. The major risk is the flammability of the product.
The MTBE is handled in the same way as gasoline, and it has the same rapid evaporation characteristics. The market for the product, which is a worldwide commodity, is expected to expand.
That is enhancing, and MTBE plants are being built now quite frequently in many places in the world, especially in the US and in Venezuela, and we have projects going on now in Portugal and in Malaysia, and this one in Canada.
So this is the only one in Canada?
This will be the only one in Canada, yes.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Onslaugh's chemical division took advantage of the company's natural gas holdings by producing methanol at its Kitimat plant. In the late 1980s, methanol emerged as a possible alternative to gasoline as an automotive fuel, prompting oil companies to develop cleaner, reformulated gasolines. Let us return to the archives as Onslaught plant manager Bill Enron shares the number of estimated ships coming into the Douglas Channel.
Ocelot produces methanol and ammonia at its petrochemical complex in Kitimat, the first such plant in BC. About 70 vessels a year call at the marine terminal to load up with the products, and there will be no difficulty handling the additional shipments.
We anticipate an additional 15 to 25 new shipments into this harbour due to the MTBE. This may vary dependent on the quantity or the size of the ship that it takes.
But your wharf facilities right now are quite capable of
Yes.
handling the extra load.
They're currently at approximately 37%. This will take us close to about 45 to 46% wharf occupancy. Lots of room.
The company has been pursuing additional investment in Kitimat for some time, and it sees the announcement as a catalyst that could lead to more petrochemical development.
I believe this is the start for future things to happen at Ocelot. All large companies are continually looking for opportunities to expand. Without that, they cannot really sustain. Ocelot has been doing that for many years and are currently doing so. We feel excited at the advent of MTBE, which needs 1/3 of methanol to produce 1 ton. So we feel that the future for Ocelot is beginning to look better, and we hope in the near future to have some better things happening here.
The marine terminal has been in operation for about 10 years and has an excellent safety record.
It's very good. We've only had one incident, and that was the vessel's fault, really. They closed a valve when they should have opened one, and we had a few gallons of methanol go over the side, but other than that, nothing at all. It's been a very safe record so far.
The terminal is used to only about 37% of its current capacity, but the MTBE shipments will bring that percentage up to 45%. An ammonia ship is almost finished loading, while a methanol ship waits in the harbour for its turn. Once the final safety checks are made, the XL will start on its return trip to California.
The pilots are flown in and they board the vessel, and the one tug for deberth stands by, and then we slowly start to release the lines on the pilot's command. And once all the lines are released, the tug moves to the port side, pushes it off, and they go out.
The project involves building additional storage tanks, expanding the rail yard, and building a new marine pipeline to the terminal. Preliminary engineering is already underway.
Right at this point in time, we have the preload done for the one tank that we're building, the 30,000 metric ton tank. That's done it was done early to get ahead of the frost so that the ground would settle and be prepared for the tank in the spring. The tank manufacturer should be on site in April to start construction. The pipeline engineering work is being done right now. Detailed designs on that are available by the end of this month. We're out for bid. The pipeline work should start in mid-May to late May to meet the schedule for the fisheries people to be through the creeks in the June 15th, I think July 15th window, and have that completed before salmon runs start again.
There will also be a lot of reorganizing.
A lot of rearranging the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. In fact, we're a little bit ahead of schedule. We look like we'll be out of the field and complete, ready to accept product for the first shipment by about December 7th and have everything complete and ready to go December 31st.
Ocelot has been transshipping methanol for another Alberta producer, Celanese, since 1983, so it has a great deal of experience with moving product from rail cars into ships. The MTBE will be handled in exactly the same way.
We will spot them in a special track. We will be unloading them through rubber hoses into an underground sump, and from there they go into a storage tank. In this case, they will go into 2 storage tanks, and total storage capacity of these tanks are about 41,000. Once they are stored in the storage tank, depending on when the ship arrives, then we will just ship the product from the storage tank into the ships. As simple as that.
When the announcement was made, there was speculation the threat of a tanker traffic ban in the port of Vancouver was the reason that Alberta EnviroFuels chose Kitimat as a transshipment point. The company insists it was cost advantages, and it also considered the port of Prince Rupert.
Prince Rupert was very close in our analysis. I think it would have been an excellent port also. A couple of factors influenced our decision to come to Kitimat, actually. The first is that the existing infrastructure is already in place, and what I mean by that is that the services that are needed for a terminal operation are already here. For example, a laboratory to ensure our product quality, and trained emergency personnel drawn from the industry base. That was one prime consideration. The second one is that Ocelot is an experienced liquids handling facility with over 8 years of experience and a good track record.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Born in 1926 on the north coast of Seal Cove, Takeo Tanabe had very little exposure to art. As a youth, he often accompanied his father on commercial fishing excursions up the Skeena River. In this final segment of Open Connection, we open our archives as Tanabe shares some insights on his painting.
Skeena Broadcaster's boardroom now possesses a 16-foot work by famed BC artist Takeo Tanabe. The painting was mounted on the wall in 2 parts, and when secured, portrayed the beauty and majesty of the Pacific Northwest coastline. And while the laborious adventure of mounting the painting was taxing, it pales in comparison to the work of art's conception.
It only takes 2.5 months to paint it, but it takes 6 months from the time I first saw the work, saw the area, looked at my photos, decided that this is the one I wanted to make this big, and then deciding from the photographs just how dark to make it, how light to make it. I mean, yeah. Before I start painting, all these things have to get settled in my head and conceptualized in that way, and then when I start painting, it should be fairly straightforward.
The scene depicted is of an area near Sarah Island, located in the inside passage between Prince Rupert and Calvert Island. The subject matter and splendor is Tanabe's passion, his artistic desire.
This is a kind of painting that I like the size because then it gives me the area and the scope in which to put as many things as I can into it and create a sense that when people look at it, they feel somewhat enveloped in it, taken over by the painting. So the painting comes out to meet you rather than a smaller 2, 3, 4 foot painting being encompassable at one glance. Essentially, I like the gray, the wet, the dark, the sense of being on the very edge, on the outside. I have painted many water views, marine views, water, bit of land, a few islands, essentially the atmosphere. So I'm constantly looking for new subject matter or different subject matter of the coast.
Tanabe currently lives in Parksville, but is originally from Prince Rupert, born there, or more precisely in Seal Cove, September 16, 1926. Tanabe's attended art schools in Canada, New York, London, England, and Tokyo. In addition, he has taught fine art in Vancouver, the Banff Centre, and through a number of art departments in Canada. Tanabe has also received the Emily Carr Foundation Scholarship and the Emily Carr College of Art and Design Honorary Diploma last year. Tanabe has taken part in exhibitions for over 40 years, including both group and one-man shows, the latter being his preference. Art is Tanabe's living, a living that is as complex as many of the works he does.
I have a principal dealer, and as a practicing artist and trying to make a living from making paintings, one has to have constant exposure. And my principal dealer is in Toronto, and so generally she gets first call on everything I paint. But she, for her commission, looks after the whole business of representing me to the public. And as a way of being a practicing artist, I think this is one of the best routes.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.